Yeah, old school. That's what I'm talking about. Listen, this ain't for everybody. Some of y'all need to hear this. I know you're in the trenches fighting, but check it out. I'm gonna put it down like this so I can help the saints understand. Everything you're going through is all part of the master plan. Or what? You thought cause you got saved everything was gonna be peaches and cream? You better wake up, son. Don't nothing come to a sleeper but a dream. Faith without works is dead. Read your Bible, you know what it says. He who don't work don't eat. Blackers don't get fed. Yeah, Jesus said he who puts his hand to the plow looks back the same ain't fit. Some of y'all ain't been in the trenches 5 minutes and you about ready to quit. I ain't mad at ya, I'm just hitting you with the real. If you died for me and I was still tripping, now how you think that make you feel? Check this out, deep game, this here's deep. Some of y'all ain't sawing nothing but you started trying to reach. But unto him who is able to possess your fathers by his glory. Struggles might be part of your testimony, but it ain't the end of the story. Now the point is this was prophesied way back in the day. Choir, sing your hook right here and see if the church can relate.
I know we can make it. Oh, we can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. Work it out. Work it out. Yeah, he'll work it out. I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yeah.
Thinking not strange, the fiery trials wanted to try you. You say, why you? But your church say, what would Jesus do? Why you asking if he ain't trying to do what he's saying? He told you he was going to have tribulations, but you thought he was playing. 1 minute you tell him how good God is and can't nobody beat the talk. The next minute you're backsliding so fast, it's like you're moonwalking. Oh yeah, I'm preaching to myself because I ain't no better. It ain't like I've been following his every word, obeying it to the letter. But we soldiers, we got to remember that. Regroup, stay on point. Yeah, bow down, confess, repent, stay humble, let him anoint. It ain't easy as I thought it was. I'd be lying if I told you that. But it showed up getting better all the time. Trust me, that's the fact. Ain't nothing we going through that can't be handled. God put that on his son. Like they say, you can shout now if you want to, cause the battle's already won. So while you're going through the valley, don't even trip. You're gonna be on top. Choir, sing the hook line one more again. This time you don't stop.
I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well.
Welcome to the show. I know we're going to be able to make it, too. This is your host, Lamont Patterson. Welcome to Can a Player Play? We definitely hope wherever you are, whatever you might be doing, and you're doing it safely this Sunday. We definitely appreciate you taking time of your day and evening or night, wherever you may be, to come through and join us. As usual, we have a fantastic show lined up for you, and we definitely want to encourage everyone that has a positive message, a positive story to come through. We'd love to hear what it is, and we'd love to have you on our show, our platform. Reach out to us at World Movement, 323-957-7322 is the office number, and we'll be glad to have you come through so you can share your message with the world. Today, we have Mr. Tim Ward is going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking about resetting our future, and that's a great, fantastic topic, and we're definitely going to jump into this one here momentarily, because that's something I think we all need to look at. Mr. Ward is the publisher of Changemakers Books, which produce books about personal and social transformation. He is the creator of Resetting Our Future book series, which we're going to talk about today. He is also an expert in international development and environment communication. In this capacity, has traveled the world, delivered workshops in over 40 countries as far as Nepal, Cambodia, Ukraine, and in Zimbabwe. Tim is also the author of 10 books, including a master handbook. Boy, you guys need to have out your pen and paper and get ready to take some notes so we can get off into this. Mr. Ward, are you with us?
I am with you, Lamont, and it's a pleasure to be on your show today.
Man, I am so honored to have you, man. Every time I speak to a gentleman such as yourself, man, I get motivated and get inspired, and I sing that song that we just heard a moment ago, like, I know we're going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tim, you have a lot going on, man. So let's jump into this, man, and on this beautiful Sunday. Tell our listeners what all you got going on, man. I know we have a fantastic topic, man, resetting our future. So tell us how we're going to do that.
Yeah, well, Lamont, as every single person in the world listening to this knows, we've just gone through a huge shock of this global pandemic. And for many people, it is far, far from over. It's, destroyed many lives. It's disrupted almost every economy in the planet. And yet, there's some wisdom behind the idea that you shouldn't waste a good crisis. When you get something that's this big a disruption, it's also an opportunity to reset yourself. And this was the idea that started eating in me about a year ago when it was then, I guess, the beginning of the pandemic. A friend of mine said, it's as if Mother Nature has said, everybody, you go to your room and you think about what you've done. And that's true, because although, our lives were very busy, we were also headed towards bigger disasters than the pandemic, right? Climate change, increasing inequality, racial injustice, inequality still persisting between men and women, and so many other problems that we're not really getting better. So this pandemic gives us the opportunity to think, well, okay, now we're bringing our economies back. In the United States, under Joe Biden, there's huge recovery program. But how can we not just recover it, not just build back, but how can we actually build forward? How can we make a better future for ourselves? And that was the idea behind this whole series of books. I wanted to give a platform to have pragmatic visionaries express their ideas, people who really know what they're talking about, so that we could all have a big global conversation about what kind of a future can we build different.
I have a question, Tim. I guess you can get into that too. How do you see this really, playing out? Because what it seems to me is the same people that create a game also made the rules, and I guess that's the problem that we are living with today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when I was starting to think about this resetting our future, I found out the World Economic Forum is also doing something called the Great Reset. It's a very similar idea, but their forum is giving space and voice to billionaires and corporate leaders. Well, how are they going to do things differently? And their basic idea is capitalism got us into this mess, so capitalism can get us out. But I think that's a questionable hypothesis. At least, can the same people who got us into it reasonably be expected to get us out? And
no,
so the real question for all the rest of us is do we want to trust the billionaires to do what they think is best? And I think some people who have a lot of money, they're really trying to do good. That's fine. But the main point is this should be for all of us to decide. It should be a conversation we're all a part of. And specifically, the people who are at the top don't necessarily really know what's going on. And I've had a really great career as a communication specialist. I've worked with people in development and environmental issues, and I know a lot of the people who spent 20, 30 years working on these particular issues, and some of them have really great ideas, really, mind-blowing ideas, but they're in the middle, and they're not necessarily creating as much influence as they need to have their ideas really be heard. Some of their ideas are not necessarily what those who are in charge want. So those are the people I wanted to give a mouthpiece to. I wanted to give them a platform to, write a book, to get it out there, and then stand up, plant a flag on a hill and say, hey, what about this? And get the conversation going and get some momentum behind it. And when I put this opportunity out there, I was really amazed, Lamont, at how many really great, smart people said, yeah, this is what I've been waiting for. And so I've got 10 books now published in the series. There are 5 more at least that are still on the way. And I'm so excited at this opportunity for these authors to have their views out, and for shows like yours where we can discuss these ideas. And people can see, well, is this how we would like our future to go?
Yes. Yeah, that, because that's really the only way that the message is going to be heard, because it seemed like standing there with their foot on your neck, like you said, if it doesn't work to their advantage, things are not going to change. And I think that's the whole problem, and we're seeing that every day on the news with the government, the way that it's constantly stalling for simple that's so basic to us, and the people are deciding how we should live our lives, don't even know how much the gas costs at the pumps.
Yeah, exactly. You know, one of the authors who wrote the book addressing extreme inequality, he talks about it in terms of a pie. He's going to come on your show later, but you know, there's the old thing about, you know, you can grow the pie so everybody has a little bit more pie. But if the people who are at the top are always making sure they get the biggest slices, then no matter how much you grow the pie, you may not necessarily be creating a better and fairer world. So to me, the real question is not just can we grow the pie, but also who holds the knife that does the slicing?
How do we change the rules? It's the thing.
Yeah.
Because they made the rules, and they're not trying to change the rules. It's going to benefit us. So the question becomes, how do we change it?
Right. But you know, to be honest, just between you and me, Lamont, I think those who we say are in charge, and let's face it, that's a pretty big and vague group, they don't actually necessarily know the answers. And especially at this time when we were building after the pandemic, if people are discussing certain ideas and saying, yeah, this sounds like a good idea, some of those are going to get picked up if they're discussed by the right people in the right places at the right time. So to me, communication is a powerful force for transformation. And all these books are as an opportunity for those with great ideas to shout it out and see who shouts back.
Right.
See what gets the conversation going, because those in charge, they don't have the answers. They kind of know they don't have the answers. So maybe they'll listen.
Well, they know they don't want to share the wealth. They know that part. They know that part.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's and I don't want to pigeonhole anybody from any group, and certainly those in government, especially when you get a change in government like we've had in the U.S., they're trying to figure things out. Some of them have really important and interesting ideas. I'm happy, for example, that Joe Biden's climate team seems to be really interested in making some big shifts. How much will they do? You know, you can't have one person succeed in Washington, right? It's got to go through many different levels of government. So it's never about just one person and their ideas. All these ideas move and take shape, and they take shape through, you know, let's face it, we're lucky. More feedback in our country back and forth between citizens and in the media and in local communities than in many others. So we should really make the most of this opportunity at this moment in time when policymakers are trying to make some big decisions.
True. Tim, you know, you have a series of books. Oh man, a series of books, boy, with a lot of great stuff, a lot of great subjects to cover. So talk a little bit about how you selected the authors for your series.
Well, I'm really lucky because in my 25 years doing communications training and environment and development issues, I met a lot of great people, and many of them became my friends. Some of them, even through the pandemic, I was meeting with socially on Zoom, as small groups or individuals, and they all know me also as a publisher. So I put this invitation out to them and invited them to also share with those in their networks. And I was really so happy how many of them responded. Oh, I can write a book? Yes, please. And not only saying it, but then actually doing it. And I have to say, most of these folks have been too busy for much of their lives to sit down and write a book. They carved out the time. And most of them were first-time authors. I helped them to structure it, helped them figure out sometimes what their big ideas were. And I set them a pretty fierce timeline. I said, ideally I'd like you to write your book in 2 months. These are meant to be short books. They're only around 100 pages or so each. They're just like big ideas. Some of them did it in 2 months, some of them did it in a year, but right now 10 of them have got it done and in print, which is pretty impressive. And I told them that if they wrote them fast, I would fast track the publishing. So these books are like written and out in a blistering speed. Normally, Lamont, the publishing industry, it takes about 18 months just to publish a finished book. So you're really looking more like 2.5 years. So we did this in like between 2 and 4 months for most of these books, which is great. And let me just give your listeners a flavor. They include everything from people who've had long careers in international development. Sometimes they're real iconoclasts, really pushing against others to try and get things they believed in done. They've also seen a lot of the world. They know a lot about how the world actually works. Others are technical experts working on things like climate change. Some are communications experts who've worked in various fields, but they know the importance of the conversation and the communication to get things changed. Some are journalists. Some are teachers. But all of them have real deep expertise in the topic they chose to write on.
Yeah, I just can't wait to jump into some of this stuff. How COVID-19 changed our lives for good.
Yeah. Might have. We'll see. That's the question from our first the first guy you're going to interview after me, right?
Right, and a long haul COVID, a survivor's guide by Dr.
And
Joseph Trunzo. That's going to be a great subject as well.
Absolutely, so many people. This
COVID situation. I don't know. I agree with the comment you made earlier. People can look at things a couple different ways, but I think this COVID thing made a lot of people look within, look at themselves, start to look at that man and woman in the mirror, and figure out really what's going on. But it really had them self-check themselves a lot of times, and instead of looking at the glass half full like a lot of people do, half empty, I'm sorry, they started looking at it as half full and figure out how they could make the best of the situation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that in itself is a really important shift. I think that it means something that people wore masks not just to protect themselves, but to protect other people. And that everybody sort of got it that the best thing I can do for myself and my family is to not spread the disease, not become a vector for it. So I think for many people there was this opportunity to really start thinking socially for the good of those around them. And, when I would go to the grocery store, I would thank the person at the checkout counter and the person packing my bags. I'd thank them for showing up and doing their job. It never really occurred to me to do that before. But now I realize these people are out there and they're taking a risk doing their job. And I really did find I was appreciating them. So I find, and I'm sure that the same is true in different ways for all of your listeners, that the experience of the pandemic has changed how you see others, has changed how you see your community and your place in it, and even in some extent, even if it was only staying safe or only providing some help or shelter for some friends or family, see us all as participants in the story of humanity, not victims or people who are just trying to get by or take what we can.
It's definitely made everyone slow down and start taking notice things that they would normally take for granted. That's for certain.
Yeah.
So then you have author Tom Bowman, Empowering Climate Action. I see he has 2 books?
Yes. Well, I'll have to explain it. Tom's book is called What If Solving the Climate Crisis is Simple? Simple is not the same as easy, but he means we tend to get sort of lost in the complexity of climate change. It just seems too overwhelming. And so we often end up not doing anything. But in this optimistic book about the climate crisis, he helps carve a clear path so that everybody can feel that they are engaged in doing something and that the task is not impossible. It's manageable. It's doable. I think it's a genius book, and it's frankly the best-selling book of the whole series. What if solving the climate crisis is simple? The second book that he has his name on together with Deb Morrison, the two of them didn't actually write this book, the heart of this book, but they were very much involved in a process of 150 different people writing the book, which is about empowering climate action in the U.S. So this is a fantastic process that actually took place under the previous administration. It took place last summer, where all these different groups and education centers, universities, NGOs, think tanks, and individuals, businesses, all pooled their brain power and thought about what can we in the U.S. do, all of us, each of us, to work on solving the climate crisis. So there's this big collective collaborative effort. It's something now known as ACE. That's Action for Climate Empowerment. And this is just the first step. But that book that he wrote about, it has the official document that all those people put together, and also the plan ahead for turning it into actually part of a national strategy for all of the U.S. in getting active and engaged in fighting the climate crisis. Mind-blowing.
Wow. Tim, with all these powerful people that you're working with and you have around in your camp, boy, I know that just helps your brain keep expanding more and more and more. You know, one thing I wanted to ask you, Tim, I know you just didn't wake up one day and start doing all these fantastic things and working with all these great people. And I usually like to go back to the beginning. Tim, how did you get started in all this? I didn't ask you that question at the beginning, but I know our listeners are curious because they say this guy is a publisher. He's written 10 books. He's been all over the world. But we always have a story. We always have a journey. It's always something that put us on that street, if you know what I mean. What got you started, man? What made you decide that you wanted to be a writer? You even wanted to do some of the things that you're doing?
Well, Lamont, I guess I was born curious is the easy way to put it. And
that's a good way.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I was like really good at maths and sciences. But by the time I graduated, I moved on to being really curious about sort of the big picture questions that are more in the realm of religion, spirituality, and philosophy. So I ended up studying philosophy in university. And when I graduated, I realized I've now grown up in North America. And I got some understanding about North America, but I don't know how most of the world thinks or makes sense of the world. And I was curious. What's it like in India? What's it like in China? What's it, I knew a middle class life. What was it like to be poor in Bangladesh? I had no clue whatsoever. And so I worked for a couple of years. I saved up some money, and then I bought a one-way ticket to India, and I spent 2 years traveling through Asia, just trying to meet people. I stayed at monasteries and some ashrams along the way, and spent a lot of time in villages and places that were not tourist destinations, that were really out of the way. And it was hard in many ways, but it was a real education. While I was doing that, I was realizing how much all these experiences were changing me. I also made it a point to write letters home. I wrote long letters to my parents, to my brother, to my sister, to my friends, and that helped me stay connected. These were the days before the internet. And when I came back, I discovered that my parents, God bless them, had collected all of my letters, and then my sister, who deserves a real medal, had deciphered them all and printed them, like typed them all out and put them all in one big binder. And I ended up using a lot of the material that was collected in those binders for my first 3 books, which were about my adventures traveling in Asia. And so in my 30s, I had a pretty good early career as an author with those 3 books published, and then I started working on a 4th. But I found it was really hard to get published. I'm fortunate, really fortunate. Back then in the 90s was a lot easier. So I got those books published. But the 4th book finally got published, and then the 5th book got published. But it was getting harder instead of easier because so much was changing in the publishing industry, and it was hard for middle-ranked authors to find anybody. Then I was given an opportunity by the person who published my 4th book to actually start my own imprint in his company, John Hunt Publishing. And I'd love to start my own imprint. And he said, well, what would you like to do? And I said, books on transformation. Lamont, I didn't even think about it. I never even thought about being a publisher before conversation in my life. But when he asked me, I said right away, books on transformation. That's what drives me. That's what makes me curious. And he said, okay, done. And so for the last 10 years, I've had this lovely imprint and this great opportunity to publish the kind of people who have trouble being published, but who have great ideas and deserve to have their voices heard. So that was my path into publishing. And during the pandemic, I really went into overdrive. There are a lot of things I couldn't do, but publishing, you can do that pretty easily remotely.
Yes,
so that's my story.
Well, when you speak of transformation, and I know you're referencing life, but can you speak on that a little bit more for our listeners to totally understand what you mean by transformation?
Yeah, sure. Glad to. Everybody knows that, we change as we grow up, we change as we get old, we change jobs, we fall in love, we fall out of love, we raise kids, we're a parent, they grow up, we're no longer a parent. There are also moments in our lives where we choose to change. Or when things happen and in response to it, we have to change, we can change one way or another. A relationship could end. We could feel free or we could feel bitter. We could feel, I learned something, I can become a better person out of this. Or we can feel, that's it, I'm done trying to connect with people. So a lot of that change is stuff that we drive ourselves. And I'm fascinated by what it is that makes people change, and also fascinated by what it is that makes groups, communities, societies change. What is it that makes, big example in the U.S., what is it that makes something like slavery okay for a long, long time, then suddenly in the 18th century there's enough momentum that it's no longer tolerable, that, there are groups that rise up against it. The government finally takes action and there's change, big change. So how does that happen? There's nothing to me that is more interesting than that. And when people write about it or when they've experienced it or when they have a plan for it, I just want to give that a lot of space because there's a lot I don't really understand, but I know that we're all in the middle of it. So
that's true.
If there's one thing, that's to be alive is to be in transformation, right? They say you're either dying or you're changing, evolve or die. And boy, if ever there was a time when for all of humanity, that's true, evolve or die. We know if we don't change and consciously change, to have a lighter footprint, to stop, damaging each other, then our civilizations will be in deep trouble.
I think that's the hardest thing it is for people to do is change, because it seems to me that you'd have to make a conscious effort every day in order to facilitate the change. You first have to identify the fact that you need to change, and I think a lot of people have an issue with that part.
Yeah, absolutely, and you the start for change, I think, is an inward thing. It's not an easy thing, but once we make it, communication becomes absolutely essential. Let's say I decide I'm going to go on a diet and stop eating junk food. That really only starts to happen not when I order something different at a restaurant. But when I start to tell people, and I tell my wife and tell my friends, hey, I'm going on a diet, I'm no longer going to eat junk food. So the minute I say it, I start to make it real. Because then, if I go to McDonald's, my friend sees me there, it's like, hey, I thought you said you were going on a diet. So my words set my path to the future. And my words can set my path to a different future. You think about it, that's amazing.
Yeah, look, especially if you're going to be honest with yourself. Quit lying to yourself.
Exactly.
Look, I'm going to get on this diet, and I'm going to stick on this diet, and tomorrow you're eating a fat burger with extra cheese.
Yeah, exactly. But if you've got people around you, and you're like, but I said to everybody that I wouldn't do that. Now it's not just about what you want to eat. Now it's also about who you are as a person.
Yeah, that's true. I know so many people, Tim, that's bought some diet stuff to go on a diet. Boy, they got 2 rooms full of diet stuff that they bought to help go on a diet and use it for a day and don't use it no more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Willpower. But listen, I want to just say for the listeners out there, we're glad to hear you join the conversation. If you have any conversation or any questions for Mr. Ward, please dial 646-929-2870. Press number 1 on your phone. We'll be glad to let you join the conversation. Some good stuff. So Tim, we got a lot of other questions here for you, man. I'm sorry. I'm reading and thinking. My mind runs faster than my mouth sometimes. You have all these great authors that's in your series, man, and I don't know, power switch. How can we reverse extreme inequality? And that's going to be a great thing to talk about because I be trying to figure that out every day. I'm one of these guys that came from Texas, a little small town that used to have to sit in the balcony and watch the movie because I wasn't allowed to sit downstairs.
Damn.
First floor.
Yeah.
And one thing I loved about the business entertainment industry is because that music is an international language and it does transcend a whole lot of stuff, and you don't see so much racism and type stuff in the music industry as you would in other businesses.
Mhm.
And
yeah.
That's going to be a great show, and I'm really looking forward to talking to the gentleman about that kind of stuff because a lot of that stuff people try to play like it don't exist, and it's got better, and I can't really say it's got better. I think it went up to the next level on the elevator, but it's still there,
Yeah, no kidding.
It's still
no kidding.
there.
And
I don't understand the reason of it because there's good and bad everybody. I've been living long enough to realize that. And it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Hispanic, or whatever. There's good and bad everybody on this planet.
Yeah, that is so true. And everybody on the planet has a right to a voice. One of the things that I love about this book is the guy who wrote it, Paul O'Brien. He was a very senior person in Oxfam International when he wrote the book, and he'd spent his life working on human rights issues. He worked in Afghanistan, he worked in Kenya, in Africa. He's lived his life in the trenches, fighting for people's basic human rights. And one of the things that he is acknowledging in his book is, you have people who've done a lot of this kind of work, but now there's a new generation. How does, even within the human rights movement, how do the people who have power, how do they then turn that power over to the rising generations, to the new activists, to people who are young and just starting out, and they have ideas that might not be the same as the older group's ideas. So he's writing both a blueprint, what do people with a lot of experience have to pass on, but also how can we do a transition?
Wow, that's going to be a burn as well, because you just shook my brain pan again because I'm looking at the fight that's going on now in terms of education, where the powers that be don't want certain subjects taught in school when it comes to different cultures and people's history. I mean, how does that work? How does that work? What they're gonna play like it never existed, or like Puff, it just blew away or something?
Yeah. All these are fights that have to be fought, and the question is who gets to have a piece of that fight, right?
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation to hear about his book too, because hear about his stuff. I'm sure he got some great ideas, because I'm constantly blown away by the things that people don't even want to be taught in schools anymore. Because I remember standing up, saluting the flag, and doing all that stuff, when I was coming up, and it was just different. I always fight about them taking the music programs out of school, I always fight about that stuff too, man, because they just changing things like, it doesn't matter. But I think if they had kept the education like it was, and I know they think it's better. And then you were talking about the young generation, how are the older people going to pass certain things on to the younger generation, and that's going to be interesting too, because it seems like if they're going to do it at home, where else they going to get it from? Because it looks like they're not going to be able to get it in schools if those people get their way.
Yeah, and that would be, that'll be sad. But that's not done. That's not done. None of it's done. It's all in process.
So, Tim, what else is in store for you? Because I know, you got other authors coming on board. What do you see yourself doing in the next 5 years or so?
Well, a big part of that is going to depend on how this series does. I've actually got a couple other series that are in the works right now, but I'm looking at having my own revolution in publishing. One of the things I really don't like is I don't like these big, thick, padded books, 400 pages, 600 pages, when the ideas are like 50, 60 pages. So I like the books in this series that are really stripped down and lean. They're the ideas, the examples, and the practical plan to make them happen, and then being published fast. Publishing's been stuck in the 18th century for way too long. There's no reason somebody can't have a book written and then available, sitting on a bookshelf, available on Amazon in just a couple of months, if you've got good editing, if you've got people who really know their stuff. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting in the world of publishing, getting good ideas out fast to meet people's needs. I've got to say, maybe this dates me as an old guy, but I love books. I think there's something about somebody who can sit down and can really construct with words a plan, a vision. It's like architecture of the mind, right? They can build something that can help change people's thinking, that can inspire them, that can motivate them, that can help them find their own path into the future. So that's high up on my list for the next 5 years.
Are you or any of your authors going to do any audiobooks?
I think so. In fact, Lamont, I have to say my son, who's an actor, has recently started getting into audiobooks. He's just right now at the very beginning of it. But I'm realizing that's a huge market, and I myself have listened to several audiobooks recently. And one of the things that I love about an audiobook is when you have somebody speak a book to you. I think you hear it in more parts of you than if you're just reading the words. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but it's kind of like music. It touches you differently.
Well, it makes perfect sense.
The spoken word.
It makes perfect sense to me because in 2006 or 7, somewhere back there when I published my first book, I did an audio book, for the author, and he recorded himself, and like you said, it touched people a lot different ways when they hear the author that can actually speak their book to them. It's more of a personal thing. And then you have a lot of people that has a very busy schedule here and there, and then they just pop it in their CD player and listen to it on the way to work or at lunch.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, we were able to touch those
for
as well.
Run, driving. Yeah, great. Just like a long conversation.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
guess the other thing, the other thing which for me is really important is the work that I've done on this series with books on climate change. It really made me realize that is something on us. I'm a baby boomer generation, right? I was born in 1958, so I really think the climate change is on us, is on our generation to not just pass the torch on, but also figure out what can each of us do to make a big difference. I've been inspired by the authors in the book, by Tom Bowman, by Stephanie Miller, who's written about zero waste living, by Alan Miller, who wrote a book on superclimate pollutants and how they can make a big difference. These are people who've really turned their life to something that, if we get it together, can make a huge difference in saving the planet. I'm inspired by that. I want to make sure that my life has an element of that too, that I'm really working on this as my problem, not the world's problem, but my problem, that I have a piece of solving, even if it's a very small one.
And it's just mind-boggling how serious climate change is, and a lot of people just don't realize from day to day. I'm also a baby boomer, so I remember when you knew what time of year it was just by the season change. You didn't have to have a calendar or look at the months. You didn't know. You would just know by the weather. You would just know. And this thing we're going to have going on now, the water shortages and the droughts in certain parts of the country, we didn't have to worry about that when we were coming up. That was never a thought. It was just, we just never had that consideration at all when we were coming up. I think here, on the West Coast, there was a smog thing with the automobiles. It was that, but we never had to worry about, like I said, the water and this extreme heat and the lakes and stuff drying up. All of that. Farmers losing their produce because they don't have water. And then they're rushing to produce fruit and food to get it in the stores, and half the time the stuff doesn't taste good. It looks pretty after they done sprayed it, but it doesn't. It's just a vicious circle. It just goes around and it affects everybody in more ways than they realize.
Yep, so true. Gosh, on the West Coast. These days, who knew that fire was going to be such a big part of everybody's life, right? I heard somewhere I heard in the news, as if it was a normal thing, talking about the fire season. There used to be a fire season in California, did there?
No. Well, we had water. We had water.
Yeah.
So, we had water. They scared to death now because everything is dry. Everything is dry. It's a big fire hazard, and I think I read somewhere today that they're talking about limiting the amount of time that you could take a shower, to cut back on the water or something.
Yeah. And you'll be happy to know that one of the books in the Reset Future series is on water. Hopefully by the fall you'll be able to interview those authors. It's called Unquenchable Thirst, and it's about water and law and how the laws we make, and basically the agreements that we make with each other, has a big effect on how much water there ultimately is to drink and to use and to keep for the environment.
Who owns water, Tim?
Who owns water?
Yeah, who owns
There's
water?
There's a big question.
Yeah, who owns it? I just wanted to know, is it the person that created a plastic bottle to put it in, or is it the person that said that they cleaned it and made it, consumable for the consumers. I mean, just who owns it? Because I remember when we were kids, man, we used to drink water out of the faucet, and it was actually good. It didn't harm you.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So definitely, I am definitely looking forward to jumping into some of those topics because those affect us daily, and we need to figure this thing called life out. That's for sure.
We do. We sure do. And hey, let me jump back to the top of the list. This is the guy who's going to be the guest on your show next week. He wrote a great book.
Professor Bart?
Bart, yeah. He wrote a great book called Learning from Tomorrow, which is all about foresight. And foresight is a word we've all heard, we all know. It kind of means thinking about the future. But strategic foresight, which is Bart's area of expertise, is actually a brand new discipline that's being developed, not just in the last, 20 or 30 years. It's a way of thinking about our future that allows people to see multiple scenarios and possibilities and how those then interact, and basically can keep you from making the kinds of mistakes we made because we did not see this pandemic coming, but we easily could have seen this pandemic coming. And this blows my mind away because I think it's a whole new way that humankind is learning to think about our future. And if there's one thing we know we need, we've got to do a better job at thinking about our future. We've got to get away from the kind of short-termism that makes us the victims of political cycles or market cycles that are only months. So this is it. This next guest you've got talking about foresight, this is what we need to learn to do better if we're going to have societies that don't crash and burn because they couldn't see it coming when it was obvious, if you use foresight.
I see another problem that I see with that, too, is everybody seems to be stuck on survival mode. And if you're stuck on survival mode, it's kind of hard to think about the future, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Partly because your thinking becomes very short-term.
Yes.
And also partly because it's then just usually about you or maybe your family if you're lucky. But when you're under stress, the part of your brain that's operating is really, that's it. It can fight, it can flee, and it can freeze. But it can't think well about options. And I think this is I think we have to watch out for our politicians. When politicians just try to scare you, especially if they scare you by saying that's the enemy over there, they often keep you from thinking well about your actual choices and about your actual possibilities for the future.
Right. And I think that's what's going to make the next guest, his show, fantastic, too, because that's what I want to know, too. How do we get these people off survival mode long enough for them to really think about the future? Because most people look like trying to figure out how they're going to make it today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because of all the madness that's going on out there in society. So, they really don't have enough peace of mind, or should I say downtime, to really think about a concise plan and how to enact it.
Yeah. And let's face it, most people in the world, most people are pretty much concerned about making it through the day. Yeah. That's true in the United States, but, if you go to other parts of the world, Africa, the subcontinent in Asia, many people, it does take almost all their energy just to make a good living for them and their families, if they're lucky enough and can do that. So, for them, the possibility of giving them enough space that they can think beyond the present moment is aspirational. To me, the fact that even people who are living in pretty wealthy societies or might even have positions of power, they're still thinking in survival mode. They're still thinking, how can I get what I want? How can I screw the other guy? Right? How can I beat my opponents? They're the people that need to be thinking big picture, thinking long term, thinking beyond them and their immediate friends, but really for the good of the larger groups. Whew, that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So being a world traveler, Tim, what are some of the places that you enjoyed, and where would you go back to? Would you go back to Cambodia, Nepal, Zimbabwe? Where would you go? Would you go back to any of those places?
I have to say the one place on earth that my heart often goes back to is Tibet. That beautiful mountainous region just north of the Himalayas. It's a high plateau, and the people there built this amazing culture, which is often called Tibetan Buddhism, but it's that's just to look at its spiritual side. It's a whole cultural whole. I've been to Tibet 3 times, and I right now I serve on the board of directors for a Tibetan NGO called Machik at MACHIK.org, and they do work within Tibet and for the Tibetan communities worldwide. The nation was invaded by the Chinese in the late 40s and the 1950s, and has been under Chinese rule since then. So it's one of the most difficult places politically on the planet. And the people there have this resilience despite the hardship that they are under. And it's at times really, really brutal. There's no way around it. And yet they find ways to keep their bodies and souls together and their lives and their spirituality moving forward. I see genuine, not only resilience there, but an ability to reach out and care for one another in the middle of things that are tough. So that's where I go, both for incredible beauty of the Himalayas and also for inspiration in the human heart.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like a beautiful place, and I guess they have a firm spiritual belief in their culture that helps them persevere and endure the other things that they're dealing with. Yeah,
that's true. To me, that's a lesson for the rest of us who feel that our life is difficult if our maca latte is cold or has 2% milk instead of soya milk added to it. We get all upset, or we don't get the airplane seat that we wanted.
Well, Tim, we're going off into another subject now, because I always think that people in this country are too soft, because they value their trinkets and their pretty cars and their jewelry and their pretty houses and stuff, and that's what they live daily for. But then there's people in this other part of the world are strapping bombs to their kids.
Yeah. And that's not their first choice.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, it's just, we just don't know. A lot of people just take so much for granted in this country, and it could be so much better, but it definitely could be a lot worse. But it definitely could be a lot better than what it is. Yeah. People just need to take time out and smell the roses, as the old folks used to say.
Well, Lamont, if we can, I'd love to touch on some of the other authors who are going to be your guests on the show that we haven't really mentioned
yet.
Go
for it.
I'd love to say a few words about the book that to me has the cleverest title. It's a little strange. Chicken Can't Lay a Duck Egg is the title. The chicken can't lay a duck egg. And what that is actually saying of Malcolm X's. And what it means is that a system that's designed to do one thing can't be expected to do the opposite thing. And the authors take this clever saying and they apply it to solving climate change. And what they say is capitalism was built to extract wealth from the environment and from people. So it can't be expected that capitalism is going to suddenly turn itself into something that's going to create a clean environment and a better life for everybody. And now they are laying out a very strong marker there. And I think that there's a lot of people who might provide them some pushback from that, even from within the series. But one of the things that I really love about this book is they paint a brilliant historical picture of how it is that the particular brand of capitalism that we just call capitalism today, it's actually neoliberal capitalism, how that actually came to be implanted in Western democracies like the United States and Europe. It was actually a small group of economists who set about to deliberately influence governments in a very particular way. And one of the points of the authors, Graham and Bernice, make is if that was done, then we can do the opposite thing. We can take better economic ideas and also influence them and get those into government and influence them in a much more productive way for all citizens and for our global environment. So I find it an inspiring book, and I know you'll love to interview the two of them. They're both former journalists for The Economist magazine. One of them was, Graham was once the Secretary General of the Club for Rome, a huge international high-level environmental organization, and the other, Bernice, she ran the Jane Goodall Institute out of Singapore. They both have serious environmental chops to bring to their analysis of how we got to where we are and what needs to be done.
Looking forward to talking to them, because I still say the people that created the game also made the rules. Now, how are we going to get rid of those people?
Yeah. So I think you may find a lot. You may find a lot. You and your listeners will find a lot of good stuff in their analysis of that game and how the rules were made and by whom the rules were made and how we can perhaps change them. Then, sort of on the other end, there's a book called Cut Super Climate Pollutants Now. Alan Miller is one of three authors, and these guys, the three of them, have all spent a lot of their career working on the ozone depletion treaties known as the Montreal Protocol. That is actually the world's most successful global international environmental treaty ever. And they find that there's a lot of stuff in that treaty that they believe we can use to make a big difference in immediately cutting some of the warming effects from climate change by focusing on a small group of chemicals. Now, this might sound pretty remote from people's lives, right? It's not quite the same as inequality, which you may see every time you go out to your job. But what they're onto can actually make a big difference in the ability of nations to more quickly prevent heat buildup from climate change. And they've got a plan that's not only well marked out, but that does include what each of us individually can do. Simple things like switching air conditioners can play a part. So it's amazing that something that's both global also can matter with your home appliances. So fabulous book. Cut Super Climate Pollutants Now is the title.
Definitely looking forward to that one as well, because I'm thinking about looking at the icebergs and all that good stuff melting.
Oh yeah. We using just a little bit of foresight, we can see that change is going to be coming at us hard and fast, and everything we can do to bend that curve and keep the heat from getting worse is going to make a big difference. And that leads me to the this one other book that you'll be, I guess I'll have the author in September, Dr. Claire Nelson, who's a Jamaican genius. She's both an engineer. She's also worked in development on inequality issues all around the world, and she's at the same time this myth-making storyteller who has just this mind-blowing ability to weave ancient myth and future scenarios into one book, which is still all about how do we achieve global sustainability. I don't think I could even do justice to what this book is about, but it's like a magical trip combining deep spiritual myth, development economics. What can I say?
Wow.
It's mind-blowing.
Sound like it. Sound like it. But she figured it out. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to be looking forward to that one as well.
Yeah, I think you might want to have your show run a little long for Claire because she can tell a story.
That's okay. We can make it happen.
Super. And the last book, and I so appreciate that we're doing this all within the time of your show here, Lamont. The last one we haven't talked about yet is called Zero Waste Living the 80-20 Way by Stephanie Miller. And Stephanie's actually a good friend of mine. I knew her when she was working at the World Bank in charge of their private sector's climate business group. So she was in charge of all the programs that a big part of the World Bank was running to get private companies to do things like clean energy, solar power, reducing their carbon emissions. And when she left that organization, she really felt the important focus was the individual, and that so often we are making daily decisions in our lives that are creating unnecessary waste, we're creating trash, we're creating extra emissions, but that we're just too busy to figure out, well, what do we really need to do? Even when we look at our recycling bins, does this go in the trash or does it go in the blue box? We don't know half the time. We make the wrong choice. We just make things worse. So she's figured it all out and put it in a nice, beautiful, simple book called Zero Waste Living the 80-20 Way. And her mission now is to go and just help households and communities figure out how to get this bit right, because each of us contributes waste to the planet. We can all do our bit.
Exactly. We sure do. We can all do better, that's for sure. Tim, I want to thank you so much, man. It's always an honor to speak with you, for coming through and spending time with us and tell us about your book and about your series. And, of course, you know, you're always welcome to come back anytime, and I hope you'll join us with when the other authors come through. I hope you chime in as well and join us.
Thank you, Lamont. I will. I'm going to be listening every week. I have so much respect for these people. I'm so grateful to you, to Olivia, to Kind of Player Play and World Movement Radio for giving them a platform on which to stand and share their thoughts and engage with your audience when they call in. I am looking forward to a really great summer with you and all the guests you've got lined up.
Yes, and it's definitely our pleasure, because you got like some great authors. And the bottom line to this whole show, people used to ask me all the time, can a player play? What kind of name is that for a show? And I say, well, if you think about it, who is actually facilitating change in this world? You know, and that's the kind of people that I reached out to for this show, people that can actually inspire, motivate, touch, change people's lives, you know, and cause them to stop walking around with their eyes wide shut. You know, they think they're open, but they're really closed. And for things that like you're doing, man, like I said, it's truly an honor to have you, to know you, and have some of these people come on the show that really could help and change some things, man. I really feel good about that.
Thank you so much, Lamont. Me too. And boy, every single one of these authors, they are players, and they are going to play hard, and they'll look forward to playing with you on your show.
Absolutely, and that's what we need, people that can affect people's lives in a positive manner, definitely. And thank you so much, Tim. And for those that just joined the show late, the show will be available in its entirety in the next minute or so, and it's available worldwide, so there's no reason that you can't hear the show if you miss any parts of it. And like I tell you all the time, if you have any issues, ask your mama, ask your daddy, ask the neighbor across the street, ask the man on the corner at the gas station. Somebody could tell you how you could hear this show. And thank you so very much. And we will see you next week, same time, 2:30 PST. Thank you much, and be safe, everybody.
Alone and lost, going soft, tick-tock. I took the cost to be the boss, so I thought yet my life was tossed to and fro up on the sea of pain again. I strained, could not refrain the fury when I couldn't make it, couldn't take it, didn't want to fake it. I had to break it, I was stuck and couldn't shake it. I tried to keep it on the run, but for the life of me, all I got was double trouble, hurt and misery. One day I heard him say, confession, sit you down and take, and he will come with no delay. If he will call, I said, okay. I told him I was sorry for the way I lived. He said, fear not, for every wrong I done, he will forgive. Now no weapon formed against me, no the gates of hell humbly to the one who gave me life abundantly. No matter who you are or what you're going